to Professor Brown webinar series. Thank you for joining us via Zoom, phone, and Facebook Live. If you are joining by Facebook Live, remember to click like and share. I am so excited to welcome Dorothy Butler Gilliam, tonight's guest, the first African-American female reporter at the Washington Post. Dorothy Butler Gilliam in 1961 historically became the Post's first Black female reporter. During her distinguished career, spanning more than 5 decades, she has become a revered icon in American journalism, a fierce advocate for women's rights, a fervent civil rights activist, and renowned author. Journalism took me places that I would not normally go, Gilliam says. In January 2019, Gilliam published her riveting memoir, Trailblazer, a pioneering journalist fight to make the media look more like America. If you have not purchased it, go to Amazon.com and purchase her book or to your local bookstore. Spurred by numerous public speaking and book signing engagements and bi-coastal news media interviews, including one on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Gilliam's autobiography has become a hot-selling item. The book's first printing sold nearly 8,000 copies within 3 months. As readers devoured Gilliam's historic, poignant, and first-hand account of the evolution of journalism, social and political discourse, and civil rights in America. Gilliam was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Gilliam earned her bachelor's degree in journalism from Lincoln University and her master's degree at Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. Ms. Gilliam has 3 daughters and 3 grandchildren. She is a member of the Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C., and Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Please welcome Dorothy Butler Gilliam. Ms. Gilliam?
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
All right, and thank you for being here. Ms. Gilliam, we're going to get started with the interview. And as I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not purchased her book, Trailblazer, go to Amazon.com and make that purchase, or your local bookstore. And if you are tuning in via Facebook Live, remember to click like and share. So we're going to get right to it. I'm so excited and thankful that you took time out of your schedule to join us. We're going to start off talking about your family and early influences. And I want to start by sharing with the audience that you were raised as a preacher's kid. And Ms. Gilliam, how did this experience shape your outlook on community service and family?
Well, the way it shaped my outlook is that it really made me know in a very deep way that I was not who the world said I was. I was a person who God loved.
Absolutely.
Who loved God. And, you know, those feelings, that sense of my inner strength to believe in God and to believe in myself, those were the motivating factors that helped me really traverse a very challenging career.
Yes, and you were also one of 10 children. So what was it like growing up in a large family during the 1940s?
Well, unfortunately, several of my brothers and sisters actually died quite young, so that I grew up with 6 children, other children first, and then eventually 5. And so that was not a huge family. And I found that, you know, with such wonderful parents, we were so fortunate that, you know, we really grew up knowing the value of people.
Yes.
Despite, their occupations and some of we saw so much love in our community. The people who would go out on their farms and get fresh vegetables and bring them to my mother to cook for our family, and there would always be enough for the men who were helping to build the church my father was building to also have food. But it was a time of just of sharing. It was a time. It was Louisville, Kentucky was very segregated. So we grew up in an all-Black community, and but it was in so many ways, despite the poverty and so many of the challenges that were faced by Black people in the 40s. There was also that strength. There was that idea of helping each other and supporting each other, and all of that really contributed very much to the person I am today.
Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned your mom, and in the book you talked about how your mother started her career as a teacher with a 2-year diploma. However, she could no longer teach when your family moved to Memphis because a 4-year degree was required. Your words are so powerful on page 85, and I'm going to read what you wrote. You wrote, in Memphis, she took on what was the only available work for Black women: domestic work, cleaning, laundering, and cooking for white families. At least it gave her the flexibility she needed for her growing family. Ms. Gilliam, what life lessons did you learn from your mother's experience of having to shift careers as a result of change in standards requirements for teachers?
Well, first of all, I resented when I was growing up that white people would call my mother to come and work in their home as a domestic, and they would call her by her first name because she was the respected minister's wife in our neighborhood, and everybody called her Mrs. Butler or Sister Butler. And so when these people would call and ask to speak to Jessie, and if I answered the phone, I would pick it up and I'd say, well, do you mean Mrs. Butler? And my mother would say, shh, 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 just be quiet. And she'd take the phone and she'd pick it up. And, I think the life lessons I learned from my mother, one was that, it's really what one's heart and spirit is that makes the difference. It really isn't their occupation. And obviously we all want to have jobs and employment that we enjoy and that bring us a livelihood that we can enjoy. But, so much it depends on, where one is, spiritually, where their sense of self, their understanding of what it means to be a Black person, the understanding of the ancestors who came before us and who did so many things and endured so many hardships so we could have what we have today. And so one of her main life lessons was, that I had to look past a person's credentials and look at the kind of person they were. What were their character assets? Were they kind, and were they helpful to others? Were they loving? But there's certainly all kind of character defects that they could have had, but they didn't have them. So she didn't want us to be selfish and dishonest and self-serving and self-seeking. And so I learned so much about the importance of having a character that was loving and giving. But at the same time, it's important that we keep our intellect sharp and that we keep ourselves well informed.
Absolutely. I can really relate to that experience. Having growing up with very middle-class parents, but having a grandmother who was one of my very most favorite people in the world when she was living. She lived to be 98, but she was a domestic. And I really appreciate that my mother really set a foundation for she and I to develop a relationship, and for me to develop relationships with family members who did not have the same social economic status. And that I would learn very young that our world is very diverse and that all people are worthy of love and respect, regardless, as you said, of their profession. So thank you for sharing that, Ms. Gilliam. Ms. Gilliam, when did you discover your love for writing and telling stories?
Well, when I finished high school, I was not thinking of being a journalist. I was really kind of an accidental journalist. I really thought I was going to be a children's lawyer, but I was working part-time after my classes at Ursuline College, which was an all-women's Catholic college, and for the local newspaper, the Louisville Defender. And one day the editor came in and he said, "The society editor is ill." And I said, "I'm sorry to hear that." And I wondered why he was telling me, but he said, "But we're going to send you out to write some stories." And so I discovered that Louisville also had a very small Black middle class. So when I went out to write the stories about their parties for the Kentucky Derby and their various social activities, it was fascinating to me to see, Black people using, the same kind of china and beautiful dishes and things that I saw when I went to the movies, that white people were using, and, that there was a whole different world in a way that they inhabited. And in many ways, that was a small glimpse into the larger field of journalism, and that is that journalism really opened doors to new worlds. And I just decided that was a profession in which I could travel, I could see people, I could discover so many things about the world and about life just as a journalist. And I fell in love with it, and I have been I've thought and written and just enjoyed being a journalist ever since.
That is so beautiful. Describe your educational experiences during your childhood and youth, and how did these experiences influence your decision to attend college?
Well, as I said before, we did all attend segregated schools. These were the days, though, when, so many, all our teachers were Black, and they were people who just helped us in so many ways. I can remember when I was in junior high school, and we would walk from my house, and my good friend Margaret and I would be walking to junior high school, and we passed through a neighborhood where there were some white kids, and they would throw rocks at us, and the teachers would tell us, don't throw rocks back, don't fight back. And the same thing my parents said, don't do that. And the whole point was, hatred is too heavy a load to carry. To hate white people because they threw rocks at you, it would end up hurting you more than it hurt them. And so our teachers were kind of part of our lives in ways that were more than just what we did in the classroom. So they're helping us to understand the society in which we live. But we also had, really wonderful teachers. I can still remember when I transferred to a historically Black college for my junior year because I wanted to study journalism. And I went to Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. And one of my professors was Professor Lorenzo Green. And, he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, Black history didn't begin with slavery. And, I hadn't thought about, we came from Africa and what was it like in Africa? And so when many years later, I had the opportunity to meet African leaders and then also to travel to Africa on many, many occasions and doing many different things, it was like my life had come full circle. So our teachers were really extraordinary. And during those days of segregation, all the best teachers were teaching us. Once integration began, some of our teachers were hired away, especially the college teachers were hired away to other universities. So I think I was very, very fortunate to have had such powerful teachers from kindergarten and first grade on up, because there was sometimes our Sunday school teachers were also our teachers at school, because that was the society then, and it really gave a sense of a feeling of coherence, to my life.
And such a wonderful appreciation that you have for teachers, and as an educator, I can really appreciate that. And I just hope that families who are listening to us via Facebook Live and Zoom, that you teach your children the same lesson. I was blown away, Miss Gilliam, on page 96 in Trailblazer. You described the loss of your father when you were only 14 years old. You wrote, "I was scared. I was angry with him for being ill. I dealt with these feelings as I would well into my adulthood by eating." When did you discover that you were coping with the loss of your father by eating? And how did you eventually heal and learn to manage your weight?
Well, I'm not sure that when I first lost weight, I really understood what was really going on with me, that I was eating to my fears. And but I did know that there was a way that I could lose weight. And I think the fact that he had suffered, with weight and had died when he was only 51 years old was an indication of what could happen, if I continued to eat. And I weighed 202 pounds when my father died. I asked my mother if she would take me to the general hospital and get a diet. And she did. And she prepared my food differently from the family. And she fried their chicken, she would bake mine. And so there were so many things she did that helped me to, lose a lot of the weight. But over the years, as I, continued to, matriculate in college and with all my different jobs, I ended up kind of yo-yoing with the weight. I would be up and down and up and down. And, it took a long time to realize, how, what was really going on. And basically, I have been a part of a fellowship for many, many years that has been very crucial in helping me to understand. It's a free fellowship. It's an anonymous fellowship in terms of food. It's not something that I'm supposed to talk about publicly because it is an anonymous program. But, one of my own desires is to, a part of my life, to really attract more African Americans to that program, that fellowship, because it's really so important now when I look back and look at where I am now, that because I did become a part of this fellowship, and because I have really, learned how to maintain my weight, learning what I can't eat, those things that, that are basically create a craving for more, like sugar and flour and stuff like that. So it's a wonderful program, and I just could not recommend it more highly. as a way to improve one's health, one's outlook, and all those other things.
I lost 70 pounds. I was 200 pounds myself 12 years ago. And listening to you, I was reflecting on the importance of structure, being around people that understand the struggle, that can educate you and can motivate you to make that lifestyle change. And it's just so important because I think when you come into the doors of any program, you don't necessarily, as you said, understand how you got to that place. You just know that you got to the place of being 200 pounds and you don't want to be 200 pounds anymore. But it is a blessing to get to the other side and to be able to inspire others, particularly people of color. So thank you for sharing that. Ms. Gilliam, you completed your undergraduate and graduate degree in journalism. What inspired you to study journalism in college and then go on to get a master's degree in journalism?
Well, what inspired me initially was my early work at the Louisville Defender when I was covering the society stories, etc., and doing some feature writing. But I knew that I needed to improve. And the college I attended did not offer journalism as a major. So I was able to get a scholarship, a work scholarship, to attend Lincoln. That's in Jefferson City, Missouri. Mm-hmm. And but over the years, as I started work, I worked for about 4 years in the Black press. I worked for Jet magazine for almost 2 years, for the Memphis Tri-State Defender. Mm-hmm. There was just always this desire in me to be a daily newspaper reporter. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where it came from. I do know that, as the civil rights movement was dawning, mm-hmm. Dr. King, had run the Montgomery bus boycott, and then the students were beginning to do sit-ins. I mean, people like John Lewis, the great John Lewis, who just passed away, was, one of the leaders in the student movements. So there was this push that we had to change this country. If the segregation that had just existed for almost 400 years at that point, that it wasn't going to happen unless we became active. And so I would hear that, go into these, Dr. King would say, and I'm trying to remember some of the places I heard him say it, because I used to even occasionally attend his church when I worked for 1 year in Tuskegee Institute. But go into these corporations and excel, mm-hmm. and let it, show people what we can do and who we are. Mm-hmm. And so that was part of what spurred me to want to go to work for a daily newspaper. Mm-hmm. And there was only one Black daily newspaper in the country, and that was the Atlanta Daily World. So I did not want to go back down south after being born in Memphis and growing up in Louisville. I knew what that was like.
Right.
So I had, spent some time working for Jet in Chicago. But once I graduated from Columbia, I was, really happy to, get a job for in the white press, but particularly for a daily newspaper. And I really didn't have any experience except, what I learned at Columbia in terms of, the daily newspapers that we produced there. But and so the Washington Post was a pretty high leap. It wasn't as though I started at a small daily newspaper. Mm-hmm. But this was the second largest paper in the country. So I'm just grateful that I was hired and that I survived, and actually ended up after working there for a while and then leaving the paper while my children were really small, and being rehired again in the 70s, that I worked there for almost 33 years.
That is beautiful. You mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King and John Lewis. Who were your most significant role models?
Must say Dr. King was a major, major role model.
Mhm.
There were so many people I admired, who had such icons within the civil rights movement, such as Rosa Parks. The fact that she just refused to give up her seat on the bus and was arrested because of that. And again, as I said, Dr. King, I certainly had a lot of regard for Malcolm X, because
Yes.
that there was uh, the blackness that we needed to embrace and to love. Dr.
Mhm.
King was the theologian and the spiritual, and
Mhm.
some of the things, of course, that Malcolm X said were just so amazing. In terms of we intend to be treated like human beings, at any cost necessary.
Right.
So
Right.
we all had, and I admire people like Stokely
Mhm.
Carmichael, who
Mhm.
is really saying and doing important things. So there were so many role models and so many people within the large African American community who were just totally devoted to change. And as I grew and advanced in my career and met and got to know people like Jesse Jackson, I could
Mhm.
see the astonishing impact that he made. I
Mhm.
think he helped to make the pathway for President Barack Obama. So,
Yes. Yes.
there's just been so many. We are such a fortunate people in so many ways. If we can, begin to get our arms around our history and our culture,
Yes.
and
Yes.
to love who we are. And I think
Yes.
so many of us do, but
Yes.
we have to make sure the country understands Black Lives Matter, but we have to also understand and appreciate how much Black Lives Matter. And that means we have to learn to appreciate each other,
Yes.
and to love and respect each other at a very deep level.
And that leads me to my very next question, Ms. Gilliam. What would you say to young college students today who want to major in journalism? What advice would you give them?
Well, I certainly would encourage them to do that. Certainly, journalism has changed a lot, but it's still so important to have people have a diverse and inclusive newsrooms.
Mhm.
Because if we're not in those newsrooms, if we're not at the table when
Mhm.
decisions are being made, our perspective is not going to be heard. And, we don't want a country where the whole story is told by one group of people.
Absolutely.
This country has so much diversity. And I would say to young people coming along now, come into the field, uh, be prepared to work hard.
Mhm.
I mentor, some young people now, and they just astonish me with how well they're doing. But it is not an easy profession. Certainly, the past few years have been, particularly hard, because you have a president who talks about fake news and who
Mhm.
really tries to denigrate the media. And
Mhm.
certainly the media there's certainly many challenges that the media has, and many changes that need to be made. But it's important that we remember what its role is. And I think we
Yes.
have to also, as citizens, demand that the media uh, uh, portray us correctly. For
Absolutely.
example, I used to make speeches, to different groups, and I would always say, if you see something in the paper, pick up the phone, ask to speak to the editor, and tell them what the problem is, because one phone call can really be almost like 100 phone calls, because people will respond. Now, of course, today, with all the social media platforms and all the technology, it's different than when I started as a print reporter. And of course, print is still very important. But I think it's still important to make sure we have a diverse and inclusive media, because that's how the stories get told.
Right.
I've been very heartened that in recent years, in recent months, let me say, that, in the wake of the protests after the murder of George Floyd, when the Black Lives Matter is leading the protest and all, I've been encouraged that, the media is more open to hearing the full story, the whole story. And
Yes.
I still sit on the board of one organization that I was a co-founder of, called the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education. And, we are being asked to, not me, because I'm not on the staff, but the staff is being asked to come into newsrooms and teach them how they can do a better job of reporting on communities of color. And, I think those are very positive signs. Yes, it's late. I wish it didn't have to take something so horrendous as George Floyd's death, but, there has been change, and we have to build on that change.
Absolutely. And prior to the change, you were in the newsroom at the Washington Post in 1961. Ms. Gilliam, what was the pace and culture like in the newsroom back in 1961 at the Washington Post?
Well, it was very different. First of all, as I said, as the first African-American woman, the first Black woman, there wasn't anybody else there who looked like me. There were two Black men, but one of them managed to do a lot of traveling, so he wasn't in the newsroom a lot. But it was very challenging, because first of all, Washington, D.C. was an extremely segregated city. Their restaurants were segregated. Taxi cabs wouldn't pick up Black people. They would see me standing out on the corner, a few blocks from the White House, waving, and they would. Some of them would kind of slow down to be sure. They'd see my dark brown skin face, and they would hit the accelerator. So just trying to do the job and doing the job was challenging. And it was also the fact that, when I graduated, the Columbia professor told me that I had so many handicaps, I'll probably make it. So I walked into the newsroom thinking, my race and my gender are handicaps. That's me, it's about my person, So, there were a lot of things that I had to challenge outwardly, and things I had to challenge internally. But there were many things I could not talk about in the newsroom. Because I knew that if I came back and said, well, the cabs wouldn't pick me up, and, or when I went to this apartment house in this very swank section of DC, and they thought I was the maid, and they told me I had to go around to the maid's entrance. If I would come back and tell them all of that, they would say, well, that's why we can't hire any Black people, any Black women, because they it's just too hard. It's not our fault. We hired her, but the taxes won't pick her up, and so I had to find ways to get around the problems and produce
And how did you do
the
that?
result. Sorry?
How did you navigate the challenges?
Well, one way was that, I said I went to a Catholic women's college for 2 years before I transferred to the HBCU in Jefferson City, Missouri. One of the things that they taught us there was how to take shorthand. And taking shorthand, I did back in those days, this would have been the mid, late 50s. A secretarial job would have been a great thing for women to aspire to, I guess. That was their thinking. But at any rate, so because I knew how to take shorthand, I could start writing my story in shorthand in my reporter's notebook before I got to the office. And when I got to the office, that helped me to type my story and write my story and make my deadlines. Sometimes I would, once I finally got a cab, when somebody finally, felt sorry for me, I would start, writing it in shorthand in my, in the cab. So those were, ways like that were ways that I got around it. Now, in terms of just, this is a slightly different answer, but one of the things that just helped me in general was that while I was at the Post, I was able to connect with some of the Black journalists who worked for the Black press, such as the Jet magazine. The person who was the head of the Jet magazine Washington bureau they were very warm and very friendly and very helpful to me. And so they're, being able to connect with them. And one of them was this wonderful woman, Fanny Granton, who would, invite me to her home for dinner on Sunday afternoon. And, just things that were just so warm and comforting. And so that was another thing that helped me to kind of navigate the problems. Knowing that there was a community with whom I could, actually share what was going on in a way that I couldn't share in the office.
Absolutely, absolutely. You are the mother of 3 daughters, and you had your daughters while you were building your career. And you wrote about the love for your children that came from giving birth to them. I'm certain that all mothers can relate to this feeling. Describe how your daughters expanded your scope and capacity to love.
Well, I think because I had really never thought of myself of, wanting to quickly have children, or even thought of myself as having children. I just sort of thought I was a career woman. I wasn't, but once we got married and, I got pregnant so quickly, it was almost impossible to describe the love you have for this little child, that you gave birth to. I mean, with my first daughter, and then, she was colicky, and I would be feeding her, and she would cough or something, and I would, think, oh my goodness, what am I going to, I was nervous too. What's going to happen? Is she going to choke? Just sort of exaggerating so many things. But then when, of course, everything was fine, and, obviously she wasn't going to, it was my nerves at the moment. But, the kind of love you have for that child was something that I just had never experienced, that depth of love before. And, it happened, again and again. So I was very, very, very blessed.
Yes. And you wrote about the conversation you had with your daughter surrounding colorism and how she discovered some African Americans discriminate against each other based on skin color when you joined Jack and Jill. I am fascinated by colorism from my experience of being a lighter skinned woman of color with a darker skinned mother. When I was young, people would say, oh, your mother had you with the milkman. To me, these comments are fueled by ignorance and a lack of awareness of diversity as well as the diaspora that exists within the African American race. Moreover, this is another example of how we as African Americans isolate each other based upon bias, judgment, and belief that self-worth is primarily rooted in skin color, which it is not. How have you and your daughters handled the challenges of colorism?
Well, I think what my daughters used to say to me was, I was always telling them about the differences as it related to race, but I had never talked much about, the challenges they might find and feel because of their skin color. And so one of the things I had tried to do was just to kind of expose them very broadly to all kinds of people, people of all colors and et cetera. And yeah, it's very sad, when people are so non-accepting of themselves, that they can't embrace the whatever shade they are. It's so important to be understand that the exterior is much less important than the interior. So that it's nice to look nice or do the best you can with what you have. But what really matters is that we develop our internal
character.
How would I explain that? Our spirit within, our heart, that we really try to avoid situations where we're learning to be selfish and self-centered and resentful and dishonest, but we try to have an open mind, and we try to have a spirit that is helpful to others. Yes. And to realize that is so unrelated to the exterior. It's it's so unrelated to your one's skin color. And I think that, again, we as African Americans, it's important to embrace who we are, because we really are just a magnificent people.
Yes.
When you think about all that we have survived, over 400 years in America, the 256 years of chattel slavery, and then 100 years of Jim Crow, and and we still have taught the world so much about love. When you think about it, in terms of our music, in terms of our dance, in terms of our literature. And we also in general are people who have not hated those who hated us. We have found that very often that we are despised, but we haven't despised back, because we know that is only going to hurt us. And I think that's an amazing thing. And so, trying to find that truth about ourselves, not that we're perfect, but trying to come to a sense where we kind of love and respect ourselves enough that we really want to be the best that we can be. And I know that so many people have done that, and they've done it well, but I think so many, when we still fight over little things like, skin color and all of that, we diminish ourselves.
Yes, we do. But change has come, Miss Gilliam. America, if they didn't know how magnificent we are as people of color, they found out last night. Kamala Harris officially became the first Black woman to be a major party's vice presidential nominee. What was your reaction?
It was a feeling of such joy and happiness. It's hard to explain. It was, wonderful when she gives a shout out to Howard University,
Yes.
to Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, which also happens
Yes.
to be my sorority.
Yes, and mine as well.
Oh, okay. Then I'll have to start calling you Sorrow Professor. But yeah, that was a magnificent moment. And I think it's important that we take our time and really appreciate what that means.
Yes.
You know, I mean, so many Black women work so hard, and we have so many problems that exist with that with Black men and Black women, because the society has done so many things that have crushed us, and in so many ways made it important to really fulfill our potential. But I think as we move forward, building on the success that we have had, and
Yes.
the change that is now possible, that it's going to be, the potential is there to be a better day for all. But there's, the country has a long way to go, because a lot of things are wrong and that need to be corrected.
When you think about building on the success of our ancestors, why do you believe it's important to pay homage to trailblazers?
Because it gives us, it's like a platform you can stand on. I talk, from my perspective, I talk a little bit in the book, not in great length, but about some of the women, Black women, whose shoulders I stand, like Ethel Payne, who was with the Chicago Defender, and Alice Dunnigan, Ethel Payne was the Washington bureau chief of the Chicago Defender. Alice Dunnigan she worked for the Associated Negro Press, and she was the White House. She covered the White House, way back in the 30s and 40s.
Wow.
I think it's a little, I think my timing is off a little bit, but I never really met Alice Dunnigan. But Ethel Payne was working when I was here working at the Post, and these were people who were not afraid to stand up in the White House and throw these questions about civil rights to the president. And the other white reporters would look around and say, why do they always do that? Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of when I was working at the Post, and I would write columns where I was trying to talk so much about the Black community, and people would say, well, why do you just always write about race? And I was like, this is not about race. This is about people of a race who are doing things. Right. I'm not just making this up out of whole cloth. These are people who have succeeded against the odds, and these are stories worth telling.
Absolutely.
And, I'm actually working on a book of columns right now that I hope to release, before too long, and just some of those columns looking at some of them to see how they relate to where we are today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gilliam. It has been just an honor to share this space with you. We have just a few more minutes, but we're going to transition now to our question and answer segment. A few people submitted requests to come on live to make a comment or ask a question. And we're going to bring in Professor Angelique Cook-Hayes, who is a professor of English. Professor Cook-Hayes, are you there? Can you
Yes, I'm
unmute?
here. I'm here.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a very engaging discussion, and I love the whole theme of trailblazing. Um, my question to Ms. Gilliam is what kept you so grounded? Because being a trailblazer is not easy. You know, like Jackie Robinson was a trailblazer. What was it? I mean, I know that you had a very strong upbringing and support system, but uh, besides your faith in God, how did you handle all of those challenges and obstacles? Because it's not easy being a trailblazer.
Well, you are absolutely correct. It is not easy, and I think there were challenges. As I said, that sometimes I would uh, problems that I wish I could have discussed in the newsroom or discussed with some of the editors just to share what I was feeling. Uh, but I felt I couldn't. And sometimes I would, leave work and have something sugary that I shouldn't eat, just, these things that felt like I was giving myself a little something, sweet to soften the pain. But of course, it didn't turn out that way. But I think, one of the things that I feel helped me was always to be in a mode of resistance. So when editors would say, "Oh, we can't find any more Black people qualified," you know, our way of resisting was to go and start training programs and start training people, and to say that to go into smaller daily newspapers, young Black people. And so we went out and found people in different professions, not necessarily journalists at all, and said, "Would you want to be a journalist?" And we have this 10-week program where at the end of it, you will be ready to go and work on a small daily newspaper. So how do you translate, uh, the barrier that's put in front of you, and how do you resist the negative behavior, but turn it around in a positive way? Really was the question. And what we found was that we could use our time, our talents, our treasure even, and train other young people. And we found so many people who could help us, who volunteered their time. So it's, I think, getting groups of people who are also interested in change, like most trailblazers are, uh, becoming active, uh, finding ways that you can use what you have to make a difference. And what we found was just using our own training as journalists to teach somebody else was a way that we could begin to get more people of color into the newsroom. So when editors would say, "Oh, we can't find any qualified," we could say, "Oh, wait a minute, there's John Doe, who lives in Philadelphia, and he's just finished a training program. I think he'd be a good candidate." So I think that you want to do those things that keep your spirits lifted as much as you can, because it's hard. Your work, it's hard work, and it's often a going against the grain, because so often we had to raise the money for these programs. So I hope that answers part of your question. But thank
Oh,
you.
it really does. It shows me that um, protest, and it's not always about being out front and showing, carrying your sign, but we can work behind the scenes to affect change. So I love your answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Dr. Angela Williams submitted a request. Dr. Williams?
Hi, good evening.
Good
Ms.
evening.
Gilliam, much for sharing your experience um, with the persistent antagonistic treatment of Black female White House reporters. What encouraging words or wisdom would you share with promising young female reporters?
Well, I think one bit of wisdom would be to remember who you are.
Mm.
You know, you are you came through into this field and you have worked your way up to where you are because you're good, you're smart, you're strong. And you also, you know what journalism is, and you know some of the needs in this nation. I think most Black journalists who have been working for years, a lot of the systemic racism and some of the white supremacy that people are talking about today. We've been fighting this for years, and so I think just remembering who you are, accepting who you are, and also understanding that you also need helpers, you need help. So banding together with other people who with similar ideas about change, about making a difference, however you can do that. I know at so many points in my career, it was so necessary for me to reach out and get help. I can remember when I needed an executive coach when I became president of the National Association of Black Journalists. And another friend of mine said, I know somebody who can help you. And that person came and just became a vital part of my life. So it's really just fine to get help, to ask for assistance, and to try to find people whose values you share, and to look at, again, not just at the external but the internal. What does this person have in terms of the strength of spirit and heart and determination.
Great, thank you so much.
Ms. Gilliam, it has been an absolute honor and privilege to share this space with you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, joining us via Zoom and Facebook Live, if you have not already purchased Trailblazer, go to Amazon.com or your local bookstore and get Dorothy Butler Gilliam's book. You will be inspired, encouraged, and motivated. And more importantly, remember to click, like, and share if you are joining us via Facebook Live. God bless you, Ms. Gilliam. God bless everyone else, and have a good and safe night. Until next time, everyone, be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.